the Crawler Canyon Competitor Spotlight Series. And in this episode, the MST CFX-W, that is Blue Sky High. So what we're going to do here is just some basic rig breakdowns. And we're going to make up some words. There's going to be some real words like verticality. But we're also going to throw in stablenessitude and bumpability. And while we're at it, swirlability. And of course you have to follow that up with X-factoring. We'll get there after some just generic driving footage. Get a little better picture of how the rigs handle, how they sound. Some are quieter than others, some are much louder than others. Get a good look at some of the newer obstacle work that's going on. And as we get through that, we'll get into a breakdown of what the, at least currently, installed components include. And then I'll just give a kind of off-the-cuff judgment of those 5 kind of intangible categories, which I'll go into a little more when we get to the breakdown. So we're just following Blue Sky High here through the newest sections of Roots Remain. A little bit more of a trailing type area of the course. It's still rough in spots, as with most of the course. It's a work in progress. But we're coming up to the photo op here for Blue Sky High, and we'll get into the parts and we'll get into the capabilities. For verticality, which is just raw straight line climbing, I would give Blue Sky High a 7 out of 10. It does have a tip over point a bit earlier than some of the others. Let's get here into the parts. Get that body off and see what we got underneath. The chassis layout of the MST CFX is fairly sparse. That deceleration planetary gearbox, as MST calls it, is fairly compact, and aft of that it's the transfer case and the battery. Blue Sky High's power plant of choice, and this is only recently, mind you, is the Hobbywing Quick-Run Fusion in an 1800 kV. It's really one of my favorite options. If the rig will fit a 550, I trend towards this, just because it's so compact. There's less wiring. It doesn't upset the balance because you're not going to have to put something on one side when there's nothing on the other. For servo, probably my favorite, more economical servo, what I would call economical, the wonderfully named AGFRC A73CHLW. Luckily it works better than it's named. For stablenessitude, which is side hill ability, I give Blue Sky High an 8. Contrary to its name, it actually has a surprisingly low CG. The body looks tall, its chassis looks tall, everything looks high off the ground, but it really kind of isn't. I've replaced the stock 80mm dual spring shocks with some 90mm Desert Lizards and used shock keys to bring the height back down. And the tires, for a while now, have been Duratrax Showdowns on those alloy B-locks. I would say the greatest weakness of the CFX-W kit would have to be the included tires. They're not awful, but they're also not really very good. So once those got replaced, the rig really transformed. Now, bumpability is what I call the ability to give that little burst of throttle to get up and over or get a wheel unstuck or what have you. And I give Blue Sky High a fairly low score. I don't know if it's the gearing in the gearbox or the gearing in the axles or some combination of the two, but it gets squirrely faster than you would expect. And combine that with a low swirlability score, which is basically how well can it use its steer angle. For some reason, the MST CFX-W has quite a bit of push to it. It wants to push a lot. And penultimately, it's got the MST factory steel upper and lower drive shafts. And then I put on the Samix titanium links because I just wasn't really a fan of the slender aluminum links that it came with. And the drive shafts, well, that slipper might as well be a slipper eliminator because I was snapping these things like toothpicks. So I just went to steel to stop having to replace them. After that, X Factor wise, would I give it a 7? I would say, yeah, I think 7 out of 10 is pretty good because its appearance somewhat belies its performance. I think it handles remarkably well. It has very little in the way of additions. It's got shocks, links, wheels and tires, and it's pretty well stock other than that. I'm really happy with it. It's fun to wheel. It likes to get itself into trouble. And I hope it was at least a little bit interesting, learning a little bit more about what's under the hood. It occurred to me that these guys only appear on camera with bodies on. So that's Blue Sky High, taking the quick way down. And I'll see you in the next one.